to the podcast. I am Kelby
And I am Erica.
And together we make up the Things You Ought to Know podcast.
Things You Ought to Know is a judgment-free platform for all members of the autism community to come together to tell us things that we ought to know.
Today we are here with the amazing husbands, the autism dads, the right hands to us. I'll go ahead and introduce. This is my husband, Michael Finati.
And this is my husband, Yani Arnautovich.
Yani's waving.
Did you take that before that?
No, I'm keeping that in. That was good. Okay, so today you're going to hear just some raw conversation between husband and wives, the process through their dad's perspective of going through their autism journey. Both are fathers to two beautiful autistic sons. Our son, Porter Finati, is just turned 5 years old, and I'll let you introduce everybody to your son, and then we'll kick it off and get to know Yanni a little bit.
Yeah, so my husband is a wonderful father to our 3-year-old little boy as well as our 3 other children. And our 3-year-old Luca is a level 3 nonverbal autistic child. And so, yeah, we are just wanting to kind of get to know like what your story was. We just kind of want to hear from the dad's perspective.
All right, so let's kick it off with just who you are. How did you, for Yanni, how did you get to America? For Michael, how did you get to the good old South? We'd love to kind of just get to know you. So I'll kick it off with Michael, if you could let us know who you are.
Yeah, sure. Mike Finati. I grew up in Hornell, New York, moved from Hornell to Charlotte, North Carolina, and really Rock Hill, South Carolina. I was 17, 18, and met my beautiful at the time girlfriend, Kelby. And now my wife and mother of 2 children.
Mm-hmm.
So
10 years married, almost. Next year will be 10 years.
Yeah.
All right, Yanni, we'd love to get to know who you are.
So my name is Yani Arnautovich. I'm from former Yugoslavia. I left Yugoslavia in 1993 to go to Germany, and then decided to go to college in the United States, New York. Then I moved to Charlotte in 2008, and met Erica 2015 in August, and we shared 2 children together.
I'd love to know what your first experience was with autism. Was it with your son, Luca, or had you been exposed to the world of autism prior to Luca's diagnosis? Can you kind of give us insight into what that was like for you?
So I don't have any experience with autism prior to Luca. I do work with kids, and I definitely noticed there was things of concern when he was about 5, 6, 7 months old. I noticed that he was not responding to his name. Eye focus was not consistent and long enough. And I noticed that the emotional connection between his mom, which he spent a lot of time with, wasn't where I would assume, based on having children prior, would be. And so without knowledge, I spoke with Erica because she also works with children. And together we did our research and came to see the doctors that were able to tell us more.
I actually want to give him a little more credit here than he's giving himself, because I was breastfeeding Luca, and Luca is still today a really good eater. And so Luca viewed me as food, and Yanni was the first one to kind of point out to me, hey, something's up here. You know, he's not connecting, because he was connecting better, at least. I won't say, you know, it was typical, but he was connecting better to me. And he was more happy with me because I was food. So that was something that, you know, I want to give you a little more credit than you're giving yourself there, because you definitely kind of caught something earlier than I did.
Yeah, kudos to you, Dad, for being observant and just in tune with your kiddo. I mean, being a dad times 3 at that point probably gave you really good insight. But so when you did notice something and you brought that to attention with Erica, were you nervous to bring that to her, or was it more of just like a dad mode troubleshooting? We got to get this fixed, whatever this is.
I was not nervous. I was observant, and I've learned that sometimes, no matter how hard things are in life, you have to take them for what they are. I recognize that there's things that not only before Luca I didn't know, but even now that we have Luca and we are a lot more experienced with autism, there's still a lot of things that I don't know, but I do take it for what it is. So when I noticed for what seemed to me abnormal behavior, I made sure I pay attention to it and pattern of it. And when I was convinced, I was not nervous to speak about it. Actually, when I did speak about it, my brother and my family, including Erica, at first didn't want to believe it, or found reasons and situations that would dispute that, which I understand at this point.
Yeah. So Luca was and still is gross motor off the chart. He always has. He scores like a 6-year-old now. And in all of his scoring sheets. And he's 3. So in my brain, going to pediatrics, he was the second sibling that was living here full time. So Zara spoke a lot for him. So that was one piece that kind of like I was trying to play the whole safety card of, he's just a little speech delayed. And also I think it was difficult because gross motor wise, he walked at 10.5 months. He crawled by like 6.5 months. He was just so, and I thought his little brain just can't focus on more than one thing. He's just so into gross motor things that, everything else will catch up. And so that was where I kept going in my pediatrics brain. So yeah, he just kind of stayed really true to what he was feeling, and just, I think less and less gently over time was bringing it up, that, hey, something's up here. And I think the way you described it was he's just disconnected, is kind of like the way he described it. And I think he had run-ins with autism before, but just unknowing at the time.
100% true.
So how long from noticing, you said he had to be less and less gentle, communicating that to you, how long before you communicated it initially, Yani, to when Erica actually said, okay, we'll do something about this. I'll go ahead and get him tested.
Well, I think it took at least a few months. I think it took her family coming down and maybe 2 or 3 times on a different occasion over the course of those 2 or 3 months. And each time they came over, I pointed out to 1 or 2 things that I kept recognizing as a pattern and a pattern of disconnection. And so when we kind of left him to show that disconnection, and second time her parents came and the third time her parents came, her parents also noticed that they're a pattern and that they are a pattern of disconnection. And that was to her as a mom and to me as a dad, and then to eye contact and something that's what I consider super basic.
I remember too, like I'll never forget, and you'll probably remember me telling you this from my story, but the time I think he had been telling me, he's disconnected, and I was like, no, he's not, because he was connected to me, so I didn't see the same things he was seeing. But I'll never forget, I took the kids for one weekend to my parents' beach house in Hilton Head, and Luca was not making any consonants, and he was like between 9 and 10 months old. And I remember my mom being like, something is wrong here. She was like, Erica, something is bothering me about his development. I don't know what it is. She couldn't put her finger on it, but something was bothering her too. And something he's always kind of told me that, has always kind of stuck with me is like, one person tells you something like, whatever, everybody has an opinion. 2 people tell you something to think about, but like 3 or more people tell you, and like, okay, we gotta figure out what's going on here.
Yeah, we can relate to that. Michael has this funny thing with me where he can tell me something, but as soon as someone else tells me it clicks. Yeah. And it's like he did all the grunt work to communicate to me over and over and over again. Bless his heart. But he but honestly, like, it doesn't click. Someone else gets the gratitude because it clicks with them. So I
think you have felt that a time or two, huh?
Yeah.
it's funny how marriage works. So let's go back into backtrack. You indicated that you think he needs help. With the help of other family members, they have assisted you with supporting your wife to initiate the help. So then, were you there the day of diagnosis? And if you were or you were not, what was your experience either learning about it in person or thereafter? Because I know some working dads can't always be there.
Yeah, so it wasn't like I was needing to support Erica once she found out for herself that there was reason to be concerned and reason for specialists or appointments to be made. Once she was convinced, which it just happened, I feel like starting that day, she was on phone going 300 miles an hour in every single direction without a stop sign or a yield sign, trying to get the answers based on what she was at that moment convinced, based on the conversations we had that sometimes were not gentle and took 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, he wasn't able to be there for the diagnostic appointment, but I'll never forget. I was sitting right outside in our backyard, and I stepped outside. My parents were here at the house. They didn't go with me to the appointment either, though. And I stepped outside to call you to let you know that he was diagnosed as level 3 autism. And you must have flown home. Like, literally got a plane and flown home because you were home in like 10 minutes. I couldn't believe it. And if you remember, tell a little bit about like your reaction, what you did. I know you kind of went outside to the side of our house with some tennis rackets.
Okay, so since we're on the tennis topic, yeah, I play tennis and I teach tennis, so I have a lot of tennis rackets. And coming from Eastern Europe, I have a very unique way of handling situations when I'm not pleasantly surprised. So I went into garage and broke maybe 2, 3, 4, maybe 5. Can't remember. Broke a couple of rackets and got it a little bit out of me to calm down. And then I was able to get back to myself and accept right at that moment whatever it was or whatever it is or whatever it's going to be. I'm 100% behind him, and ready to take whatever road we needed to, all the way to my last breath, I guess.
And he's really done that. Like, ever since, he's been just a huge advocate for Luca, and something that, I'm really proud to say that he's Luca's dad.
Thanks for sharing that. I know that's probably not I don't know, I'm assuming maybe not one of the things that you highlight to people on this journey, but I do think it's relatable especially for fathers that are walking this journey. It's like you're the fix-it people. You want to quickly fix it, and when you can't, sometimes there's some built-up tension that just needs to come out on a tennis racket.
It was just that.
It wasn't anything else.
But that's a beautiful story. I know that's a contradictory way for people to kind of explain those stories, but I really want to thank you for being raw and bringing that forth to us. And it highlights that it's not always beautiful, but you can find the beautiful in it because you both came together. You activated family members to help you kind of bring forth the information to your wife. And the fact that you have that village and the family members and you felt like you could trust them to like help you support Erica with that, it speaks highly of just the village you both have. So thanks, Yani. Okay, I'm going to let Erica kind of interview my hubby and get to know you. I will say I am excited to kind of hear Michael's perspective because it is something that I know when he travels a lot for work, he is not shy about sharing our story, and he's so proud of our son. So he talks so much about Porter and so highly of him, but I don't get to travel with him. And so I'm not the one that usually gets to hear his perspective. So I'm going to sit back and listen and kind of soak up what you have to say and what you think people ought to know about your journey into fatherhood and the autism world.
Yeah, sounds good.
So, a little different from Yani. Porter is your first son. So this was your first experience as a dad. And so give us a little bit of insight as to, what that journey has looked like for you.
Yeah, so I always wanted a boy. So having my first child be a son and be Porter, that was an amazing feeling, right? And for me, I'm a big teacher. In my work life, I had found that I'd love to teach people, and I always wanted that within the children I have, right? Ethics, morals, just how to do general things that you may not have gotten in your childhood. So for me, it's a big deal on what you put forth in a fatherhood to your child. So I had a real big connection with Porter right off the jump. I at least like to think so, and I was lucky to have a mother that she pushed love on us so much as a single mother that was natural for me to kiss Porter 10 times a day, to tell him I love him 10 times a day, and to just be playful, right? And everything went really good with Porter. I don't know, I would say probably at least into the first year. And then as he was getting past that first year, it was all going real good. We'd go to the grocery store, he would wave at people, right? Eye contact is fully there, everything's good. Around 18 months, 2 years, he started to regress. The light switch was just off. So he's looking at you, I can tell him I love him 10 times and make faces, he's laughing, all that. To that just kind of backsliding. He doesn't want to look in the eyes anymore. He's not waving at people in grocery stores anymore. And you're trying to figure out what's going on. And I think, too, Kelby and I were living outside of Boston, Massachusetts at the time, no family around. I was working 80, 90 hours a week.
The height of the pandemic.
Yeah,
this was April 2020.
Yeah, so that was hard. And through that regression, you get with medical experts, and I'm a big proponent of why. You're not just going to tell me your degree means nothing to me. Your education, I don't care about it. If you can't explain why and the direction we need to go, then I'm going to try to figure that out. So with Porter, it was us reading to him, working on how to say words right. Even when he didn't want that connection, I made sure to still give him that loving connection, right? You almost forced it, but I was like, hey, you're going to understand, like this is okay. You want this. I don't want to have a big gap where we don't physically connect with hugs and kisses and eye contact. Early on, I was hearing about it, and I would hear things from people that proclaim to be autism experts, that if they don't like eye contact, maybe eye contact isn't good. And for me, it was absolutely not. My son's going to look me in the eyes. I'm going to look him in the eyes, period. When it came time and we got his diagnosis at he was 3.
He was 22 months old, just shy of 2 years.
So I'm way off. But so, at that time period, 22 months, the diagnosis didn't mean anything to me. It was a lot more impactful for my wife. For me, it was the way I look at it. You have these children, and for me, 2 boys right now. You have these 2 boys to teach them and train them to exist when you're non-existent. So the diagnosis didn't change that for me. He needs to understand how he can communicate, whether that's through an AAC device, whether that blossoms into being vocal. So you could tell me a diagnosis, but the diagnosis didn't mean anything to me because it didn't change my responsibility or my duties. That's where we were at.
I think that's really cool. Something that you said was like you were going to kind of foster that bridge to him for love and that connection, kind of no matter what. You were going to make sure that he definitely was available to him if and when he wanted it. which is a really, really awesome thing. And so that's such an amazing story, and very different than, ours and lots of other people's, where, we didn't have a regression. There was just, we plateaued at a certain point. Right. So that's like a really interesting thing, especially being a first time dad and, seeing all that just kind of like from one day to the next kind of stop. And that, that's tough. When you're with Porter now, kind of something that Kelby has said to me a few times is that, Michael is kind of his person. And so I love that. But tell me, how do you feel about that role and responsibilities, kind of being like Porter's person?
It's a beautiful thing. I get on his level. If he knows a spot in a movie that is his favorite, you memorize the lines, and he wants you to say those lines over and over again. We jump around, trampoline stuff. You do normal dad things. You throw them around. You do all this stuff. And also, on top of all the normal things, what is beautiful about it was, so my mother, she's fully deaf. I believe she went deaf when she was 30. At the time, I think I was 3 years old. And so she reads lips. You're growing up in that. She's fantastic at it. And I to this day, I don't know how she does it so well. But there's still those times where she couldn't understand what you're saying, and you have to repeat yourself a lot. Through that, right, that form of a disability, you do learn to be patient. And I'm definitely no saint, and I'm not the most patient person. But I do believe my mother helped contribute to how I am with Porter. And Porter taught me to be more patient. So for me, majority of the time, it's not perfect, but I think I excel pretty well at getting on his level and trying to figure it out instead of reacting. Again, you're not perfect at it, but you recognize you have to do that. So all in all, it's a beautiful thing. I love being this person. It also comes with a lot of stress. For me, I like Kelby said, I get to travel a lot for work, and I'm blessed in that. I open up to people about Porter. I'm not shy about that. I love having children. I want more children. So for me, I tell them about Porter, what he has going on. And I've heard stories, recently I've heard a few stories now of the father being in a similar situation, passing away, and the mother having to put the child in, pretty much assisted living, that type of thing. For me, that's what terrifies me. How people react to Porter, if I'm not around, terrifies me. People know me as a helicopter parent in the family. They joke something's wrong with Porter. I mean, I'm running to figure out what's going on. I'm not just going to let it work itself out, and that can be a fault at times. I feel like that's my responsibility. It'll be my responsibility till the day I don't breathe. So there's a lot of things I look at different. I like to ride motorcycles. At times I've debated selling the bike because what if something happened? I have to think about being around long term. Because Porter, I'm a big guy. I'm 6'2", 230. Porter is 5 years old. He's over 70 pounds. He's in a height class of a scale of like being 8 years old, right?
Yeah, we don't make small babies.
Yeah. So when there are those times where he can't regulate too well, at night, I may have to go in, bear hug him, things like that. And those are things that Kelby can't always do that I can do. Even traveling, and being absent from that can be hard.
That's a really interesting perspective. Yeah, that's something that I think every autism parent feels to some degree. But for a dad to be able to, express that level of, that emotional, like you're scared for what happens if and when I'm not here. And they're so young, but we know, the likelihood of them needing some support after we're gone is there. And that's a big topic, especially as kids get older. But thanks for sharing that, because that's something that's a really, really big topic, especially like once these kids hit I think like middle school age is kind of when these parents, they say there's like a whole second grief wave. I know my husband does not like to describe anything that he has dealt with Luca to be like a grief cycle of any sort. Like he doesn't like that word. And I don't know if that's just a man thing, if that's like a my husband thing. Tell me a little bit about your experience with that.
Yeah. So, I don't care for the word either, because I look at feelings are subjective. And the bottom line is you can only control that. No one else can. You can't force it on somebody. For me, it's in a moment of chaos, how do you look at that? Do you look at it as the glass is half full, half empty? I'm sure at times Kelby gets frustrated because I say that phrase all the time. I grew up in a household, again, single mother, struggles come with that. And when there was chaos all around, my mother would say, everything is fine. And she's right. Everything is fine. Right. I mean, I have a sweetheart of a son. And through the process, I mean, it's created patience in me. It's created a special relationship with him that I don't know if I would have had otherwise. I like to think I would have, but that doesn't even matter. What matters is what reality is. And I accept it openly. The things I don't accept through that is a lot of those words. People want to talk about grief. They want to label so many things within the autism community. And I can't help but feel like that's playing into a victim. I'm no victim. My wife's not a victim. My son and my other son are victims. This is a beautiful thing we have. And so that's how I look at it.
I really love that perspective. One more thing I want to ask, and then I'll get you out of the hot seat. But one thing I really want to ask, because I know, and maybe it's, that's an interesting point you made, but maybe it's me kind of playing into that, like that community of moms that we want to build a little bit, and something to kind of deep dive into maybe on another podcast, another day. Is that whole word grief and that grief cycle that like moms especially we talk about. But I know that like when I have brought it up to you in the past, especially, you have a very similar reaction to that word. You don't like the word. You don't believe, like, you don't really think it's grief, right? Like this is what is, this is the reality. And maybe that's just the way a man thinks about something versus a woman. It's more like black, white, logical kind of thing. Whereas like we have all of the emotions that go along with it. But for us, that has caused some strain at times in our marriage, just because, I call it, we don't meet each other on the grief cycle sometimes. That's how I view it. And even if he's not like using that word or that term, that's kind of sometimes like that's caused some tension and some stress. So like, can you talk a little bit, you guys, about kind of like this journey, like what it's looked like for your marriage, even at times?
That one's going to be a tough one to not cry about, because we do words have a lot of weight for me. They mean nothing to him. He can say it and it can fly off, and it could be said to him and it can fly off. Whereas I receive that very differently. But as far as like within our marriage, our hardest times were through that first 2 years of diagnosis. I struggled with postpartum depression after Porter was born, and we had some familial controversy around there. We were both very much helicopter parents. Don't touch, don't hold. We wanted him like attached to us at all times. And we had to kind of work through that. We then, a year into having Porter, right shy of a year, we moved 16 hours away for Michael's job to the Boston, Massachusetts area. So again, that was right at the height of the pandemic. So we were thinking, at the time, everybody was saying like, oh, it's just going to be 2 weeks of shutdown. So we're thinking we're going to move into a hotel, because his job put us in a hotel until we could find housing. We're going to move into a hotel. It was me, my 1-year-old son, almost 1-year-old, my husband, who's working 90 hours a week trying to turn around a new district, prove himself for the company, and then our 2 labs. in a hotel room in the middle of Massachusetts, not knowing anybody and not having honestly, the legal options to get to know anybody in the hotel. We weren't allowed to like pass each other in the hotel room or in the hotel hallways. We couldn't be in the laundry room. I mean, everybody, I'm probably saying this and you can reminisce on the red tape surrounded around socialness and getting to know people. So then we didn't notice any kind of differences with Porter initially until we went to the pediatrician. You fill out the paperwork. They think it's a hearing issue because he is very much advanced on gross motor skills. And so we thought, okay, it's just hearing. So I'm in mom mode. I'm like, okay, we got to get a hearing appointment. They didn't give us it in an adequate time. I'm calling every day. And Michael's like, it is what it is. If it's hearing, that's his favorite saying. My whole family knows that about him. It is what it is. So we would differ within that. At times when I was the storm and I needed him to be the calm to the storm, I think we were both the storm at times. And so we were just fighting each other. And then it came into the, hearing test got passed. So it wasn't that. So then we moved into early intervention. Early intervention started to briefly bring up conversations with me. He's working still 90 hours a week. I'm also working full time, but I'm trying to manage and be a caretaker for Porter. I kept him at home with me. We didn't, again, both very much helicopter parents. We did not feel comfortable putting him in daycare at the time. And so we kept him home. So early intervention was coming into the house and they started to gently bring up the delays they were figuring out. Like he was having a hard time transitioning, not pointing, not making eye contact, not answering his name. It started to they gently communicated that to me. And then I would communicate that to him and it would be like, I think he would still think it was his hearing for a while there. He still thought it was like his, given his mother is fully deaf, it runs in the family. It's a nerve disorder. I think I'm saying that right.
Yeah.
So it's on our mind. It's hearing. And it ended up not being that. We got him diagnosed. It was January of 2021, I think is what it was. And I think we drove home that day and we both kind of just didn't speak much about it. It was kind of like I was going into action mode. I'm starting to, therapies, ABA, speech, OT, all of the fun things that come along with the diagnosis. And then Dad just kept being Dad. And that's what I needed in that moment without realizing, looking back on it, I needed him to be that constant of just being Dad because I was the chaos at the moment in time and you were the calm. But times I was like, why aren't you freaking out? What about the unknown? That's where my mind can be my enemy sometimes. And I start the fear of the unknown. What does raising a child with autism look like? Will he ever speak? Porter is still non-speaking. He uses an AAC device right now, but he, by golly, knows how to say daddy. He can say dada. I have yet to hear mama if we're working on it. But we were butting heads. It was the hardest point in our marriage. But we communicated through it. I mean, we always say communication is our downfall, but we also are very good communicators. It's just we're hard on ourselves. But we got the help of a therapist to be very transparent. Helped us learn how to communicate better with each other. Him to see my side of things, me to see his side of things. And we were able to come out of the dark side is what I call it. That was a very dark side of the ebbs and flows of marriage and all the fun that comes along with it. You want to add to that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. From my perspective in that situation, I mean, like Kelby said, through that process, we're on our own. There's no family in Massachusetts. I'm working 90 hours a week. With that, there is no end of day. So we moved there with an expectation of my work of, hey, if you don't fix it, there's nothing here anymore. So that pressure was on. So I'm doing my thing on the business side. And the few hours I had where the worries of business are in the back of my mind, I'm just being dad. It's easy for me to joke around, throw Porter, give him kisses, tell him I love him 100 times, and just keep on moving along. At the same time, because of how I grew up, for me, you accept what reality is. It's okay to process it, and you should process it. But I have that skill built in internally where I can process things on my own, and I don't want to necessarily talk about it. When I processed it and moved on, and there's some things I don't like, but you learn not to. You don't lean into that, and you don't cry about what you can't change. You don't focus on what you can't control. Focus on what you can control. So for me, it was okay. Well, I'm not going to just accept what is, and I never. I'm going to always do everything I can to better Porter in life. And the goal is for him to be able to verbally communicate one day. It doesn't matter if he's 30 years old and I'm 65. I will still be right at that same spot. And the responsibilities never change. With that said, where I failed as a husband at the time was recognizing she needs that communication. I still fail at that at times because for me, it's again, you can only control what you can control. I'm not going to focus on the uncontrollable, but she needs that conversation. She at times needs not just the shoulder to cry on, but an accepting shoulder to cry on. Where I'm not accepting, I don't want to hear about what I can't change. I'm gonna get mad. Right?
It opens the closure that you've probably made, and having a wife who's a lot sometimes emotional after having birth and hearing news like this, it doesn't go well with I made peace with what it is and I'm going to do good, when you have to help the parent next to you almost on a daily basis go through that. It doesn't necessarily close your chapter so you can start moving forward. So yeah, it's understandable friction when you're not aligned on something as maybe life-changing and at early stages it is, where
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing to recognize because I mean, my apologies if you don't like that I bring it up, but like we also had a miscarriage, and very similar in that. That was a lot more impactful for Kelby, and it should be given the role you play in. For me, I can't control what I can't control. And that's how my brain works. You identify the controllables, uncontrollables, and you move on. Like you said, that is right. You process it. I've processed it. I don't want to read it. Right? Just like in a childhood, if I've processed something from my childhood, I don't want to sit here and read it. You know what I mean? So yeah, to that point, you accept what is, you move forward. But it's important to recognize that's also a response. I talk about owning your responsibilities. One of those is that I be a, receptive shoulder to cry on instead of just give off this vibe of like, oh, get off me. I've moved on. You move on too. You have to understand that.
Yeah, I think that's a common, I mean, I know that that's like a lot of things that you guys spoke on just now. I mean, I think we were kind of over here, like, clenching hands a few times because, under the table, because I think a lot of things you said very much, resonate with us in our story. And just, I think that's probably a very common thing that couples go through after just parenting in general, but then add a special needs child to this and a pandemic. And, Luca was born in 2020 as well. And we got pregnant right before the pandemic started. And, so we weren't trying to get pregnant during the pandemic by any stretch. Not that that's a bad thing if you were, but it was just, life is so unpredictable in so many ways. And then, add a special needs child and throw that into the mix of marriage, which is very, difficult. The divorce rates are not what they are for no reason. And then, wow. Cause I mean, yeah, it was really crazy how many times I think we were like tapping each other, clenching as you guys said something, just because that was definitely very, very relatable story to us.
Yeah, I've seen it, you see it just through research about autism, marriage in general. We're at like a 49 to 52%, depending on the statistic you look at, of divorce rate in America. And then it jumps to the most recent study that I saw shows 85% for special needs parents is the divorce rate. So we we always said, like, when we got married, the D word is just not allowed in our vocabulary. But it got said like a few times through that time period because we both weren't feeding each other's needs. And we had to like work it out with each other. And now it's off the table. Like he can't get rid of me. But honestly, I think the biggest thing that we did through that time was humbling ourselves and asking for help with a therapist. Reluctant, we were both white fisting the whole way through it, but we needed help, and we're both people to not ask for help. We can like fix it on our own. We could do it on our own. If you ask my sisters, which I'm hoping we can have them on eventually, they'll tell you like they had no idea we were in the deepest part of ourselves in our marriage at that point. They thought we were rocking it as parents. Like they thought we were okay. And it wasn't until I said we're not okay that they were like, okay, how can we help? Our village was activated at that point. And we may have had to pay for the therapy, but it was well worth every penny.
I love that. Yeah. I think that's a really hard theme. I think for people in general, I think women tend to be overall, like statistically, I think more acceptive to therapy or like an outside help. Men in general, especially an Eastern European man, like asking for help is just really, really off the table. Do you want to comment on any part of that?
Well, I think everybody has different ways of coping with their stress or their life issues. Somehow, mine living through what I lived through does not ring to therapy as maybe a first line of defense or top 5 line of defense. I guess it's how you lived up until that moment and how much you relied on someone helping you versus doing things a little bit more yourself or not having availability for somebody to help you. So you've never considered outside help as the option to be had. And when you do that, like with everything else in life, sometimes you just learn to function, like Michael said earlier, a little bit faster and better for yourself on your own, knowing what you can control and knowing what's outside of your control. And so never really was a big believer in therapy. Still am not. Maybe nothing huge hit me yet to believe that I do need or think of therapy differently. But I feel therefore much, I guess, easier or stronger when it comes to Luca's diagnosis. More confident, like Michael says, what your responsibility as a father is and will be. And I use it as a blessing versus the word grief, if I have to go back to that, because not every parent is blessed to know how different it is to love a child compared to status quo. Mm. And so what he has taught me, my 3 children did not, and that's to be blessed. That's a blessing. That's a definite blessing, and I live every day with him, and it's a blessing every day because it's not, I guess, the status quo.
Thanks for sharing that, Yani. I really appreciate you giving your perspective. And then I really like how you changed the word grief to blessing. It's a good perspective to have, and I can understand it. All that you explained and the why behind changing it. Some people may not agree. Some people may agree, but that's the beauty of doing this and being honest and transparent is you are who you are and you believe what you believe and you stand on that. So thank you for being vulnerable with this today. We really appreciate that. I'm only going to pull a little bit more emotion out of both of you. I said I wouldn't, but I just want to know what would you like the ending segment of our podcast is always going to be for whoever we have on to tell us something that they think the world ought to know about autism. So my question to both of you is, what do you think the world ought to know about being an autism dad? Michael, we'll go ahead and kick it off with you.
What I would want the world to know is that a child, adult, doesn't matter, a person with autism, they perceive the world different from how you perceive it. So your expectation of how someone should respond to something or perceive that situation that's autistic is, if you expect them to see it the same way, I mean, you're doing them a huge disservice. And there's a lot of beauty in getting on their level and seeing the world from how they see it. When Porter gets out of hand, and let's say we're in public, I try to keep in mind of the idea of, I saw a video, an autistic perspective was in the grocery store, they have a tantrum. They are seeing a woman argue with her toddler to not get snacks down the line. They are seeing the wheels on the shopping cart move past them. They are seeing all types of isolated, different interactions happening simultaneously that we don't see. And so that's overwhelming for them. So I think it's important to just keep that in perspective.
Thank you for sharing.
I love that. I love that story. I've seen that little blurb too, and I think that's a really cool way to like understand autism. I use that a lot with my patients too, to kind of get them to understand what those kids are going through when they're having those meltdowns. So I love that one. Okay, good. What do you think?
So I think what we ought to know is that we will not know enough in time to act upon our knowledge. So what I'm saying is a lot of it is unknown, and a lot of it is you can't really tell future, and a lot of it is nothing is promised, and a lot of it is and depends on who you are at the moment. So what I think we ought to know, or at least what I've learned, is that it's okay when you don't know, and when that happens, that it's good to be in the moment, because in the moment you know. And so
You kind of figure out what your kid needs, like in that moment. Yeah. Like, and that's how you learn your kid. So when they're having a hard time, that's how we kind of become their experts.
We'll go ahead and wrap up, and just again, thank you both, strong men, for being our strong men, our constant, our other halves.
You got it.
The calm to my chaos, sometimes the chaos to my chaos, but we work through it. But we really appreciate you. I think this is going to be very relatable for other dads. I was recently at a conference it's like a mom's retreat for autism moms. And I told them that you two were coming on to one of our podcasts, and they were very excited to be able to. They related it, you know how you like see reels or TikToks and you're like, that says exactly what I want to say, but I don't want to actually say it. So I'm just going to send it to them. And so hopefully if you're listening and you're a spouse and want to be able to gain the perspective of one of the autism dads sitting here today, you can share this with one of your husbands or just partners, grandfather, someone who's walking this journey as a male figure in their lives, and be able to kind of hear and gain perspective from two different perspectives. I mean, like you heard before, Porter was progressing atypical or neurotypical, and then one day, like Michael likes to describe it, the light switch went off, and we had now a different kid, and yours was different, and Yani became his first advocate, which how cool is that?
Yeah. Yes, he definitely did. And so, yeah, two very different stories, and, different walks of life, and some different perspectives, a lot of similarities though. And so I think that as, husbands maybe listen to this, or wives, like you said, send to their husbands so that they can kind of get a male perspective. There's so much out there for moms, but there's not as much out there for dads. And so you guys being strong enough and, you know, courageous, brave enough to like put yourselves out there so that these dads can have a platform as well is really amazing. So thank you, and thank you for being our first guest.
Okay, so we invite you to please like and subscribe. We want to hear your feedback. We want to hear things that you think we ought to talk about in the future topics. If you think the stars of the show were the dads and you want to have them come back and you have some questions for them, I'm sure you could probably comment and leave comments on our YouTube page or on our Instagram. That's usually where we're the most active, and ask questions to them, and we can get those answers and either have them back on or be able to communicate for them what their answers were on the next podcast. So we appreciate you listening to this vulnerability today.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, we definitely appreciate everything, and we can't wait to talk with you next time for more things that we ought to know.
Talk soon. Bye.